Here. Thank you for staying with us. If you're like me and you and your work makes lunch optional, how many people is lunch optional when you're doing the work of an administrator? So it's so nice to have lunch. So I hope that you can stay. If you're like me and you eat lunch, sometimes I get sleepy after I eat. So we're going to get you active and engaged in a little bit, but we're going to try to get some real learning components set first. We have two screens, and just logistically, it makes it a little bit difficult to keep that screen on task. So if folks don't mind coming this way a little bit, it might be easier to engage with us. So it's totally up to you, but I just thought I'd put that out there. So I am Adele. I am the proud superintendent of Webster Schools for 4 more days. And then I will be transitioning to Rochester City Schools. So just very quickly before I introduce my team, I started in rural schools. I started in a county where there was more cows than people. That was my first principalship, and loved that work, loved that culture. Then I moved to suburban district, which is Webster, and now to complete my career, I guess, I've decided I'm going to take this challenge on that is urban education. Really, at this juncture, it really is time for me to walk my talk. And if all students mean all students deserve access to quality education, I'm just going to go put my efforts to that work. So it is a very exciting time for me. And I'm just so honored to be able to do this presentation with Terry, who's a K-12 content director for Webster. He's supervising this year social studies and languages other than English. One thing, if you speak to Terry for any length of time, you'll find that he's done just about everything, multi-talented, very adaptable, very malleable. So we're presenting with Terry and with Kate. Kate is an instructional specialist with Webster, and we have found that we are a good thought partner. I call her my thought partner because so many times we think about the work and we say, how do we say something? And Kate and I just seem to have that chemistry about putting things on paper and getting things to be clear. So we are going to, you are the group that answered your survey in a different way than the morning group. So we have customized this presentation differently. We felt that you had a better handle on professional learning communities within your districts. So we're actually going to, this presentation is different. It's going to stretch you a little bit and give you some tools, really practical tools to take your district from where it is and have it functioning even in a more systematic, impactful way, and getting your best efforts, your best system created that can focus the work on students. Because we know that is the challenge in any system. When you want to make substantive change, let's see if I can get this to work. And this is, yep, is it off? We know that the challenge in education is to adapt and to get the system to a different place. Education is always evolving, always changing, meeting the changing needs of the workplace, but especially now when our students' future is so different than our past. And we really have to get malleable, and we really have to adapt, and we have to do things differently. And sometimes when we start to lead the work, we think, you know what, if I want to get something to change in education, and I'm well-intentioned, and I feel like I'm clear and I have good leadership skills, it's just going to go, right? And we're going to get from A to B, and it's going to be fine. Until we start to do that process, and then we realize that it really is, the right side is what it really looks like, that when you start off to make something good happen for kids, it's going to get messy. If you're really leading change, it's going to get messy sometimes. There's going to be mistakes. It's going to take twists and turns you don't expect. And this line sometimes gets so tangled it feels like it wraps right around your neck and starts to choke the very life out of you sometimes, if you're really leading this work well towards the change. So we just wanted to put this graphic up here and say, you know what? We're going to talk about what to do when it gets messy and you're trying to lead a change, because success is really not a straight line. So one of the long-standing habits I've had as a leader, really since I was in 7th grade, is I get up in the morning and I read something inspirational. Right? Because I find I have to center myself. I am not a person that listens to any newscasts in the morning. I'm just centering myself, thinking my thoughts, and getting ready for the day. So I'm going to read you something from my journal that kind of goes with this graphic. And this is a superintendent's creed, and it's from Andreas Alonso, who's superintendent of Baltimore City Schools. And I wrote this in my journal when I was getting a bit of pushback for a change I was trying to lead. And I was trying to determine how I was going to deal with that and what kind of core I was going to have as a leader during this time. So this creed is called Have No Fear. The reason why I have no fear is because I literally think I give it my best. As soon as I give it my best, as soon as every decision is stemming from a very strong core, then mistakes are part of the game. Times when things can be better, messiness, all those things are part of the game. Fear cannot be part of the game because that impinges on the ability to inhabit the moment with the good of all kids in mind. When you want to lead well, you have to harness the power of your mind. And you have to stay in the moment and make decisions with the good of all kids in mind. If you are afraid, if you're fearful, it clouds your judgment. And I had to coach myself through, well, we all coach ourselves, right? Constantly, every day. But this impacted me in a way, and it really just rhymed with this graphic that harness the power of our mind, lead well, make decisions with kids at heart, and have no fear. So we wanted to show you this graphic just to show you that we are a team and we believe in collaboration. We collaborate within our district, and that's why we're presenting with all three of us, and we collaborate with the larger educational community, so you can tweet us. We do tweet and learn from Twitter, and we just wanted to put that graphic up.
All right, and so as we think about this being a learning session, we have identified 3 major learning outcomes, and if hopefully you can read, I'll read these to you. I know it's a little bit hard, particularly in the middle, to see both or either of the screens. So first, identify and sustain leadership roles and structures to support continuous improvement. So as Adele mentioned, this group had self-identified the implementation of PLCs. How do we continue to improve those? Cultivating the voices and expertise of teaching faculty and sustain and deepening the work of the PLCs. And we all have those high quality teachers, and how do we find multiple ways to engage those professionals in their work? And then develop a K-12 shared learning plan and goal-setting structure that targets and focuses district resources towards prioritizing our learning outcomes. And one of the things we'll talk a lot about is we're not getting any more time. Our time is pretty static. And my guess is nobody in any district says we don't have enough meetings, right? So how do we look at things strategically from a system view, from a building view, from a grade level or department view, and say how do we maximize the time that we have? We are all working very hard. The challenge is how do we all work very hard in the same way? And so one of the tools that we're providing for you today is what we call a high impact strategies journal. And so these, you have it at your table. This provides some examples of work that we've done. We'll be digging into this document throughout the presentation. Some things of how Webster's looked at the world as it relates to professional learning communities. There are some blanks if you wanted to customize those for your needs, but we'll be digging in at various times throughout. So you'll see a screen that'll say High Impact Strategy Journal. That's a cue for you to dig into your journal. And we also wanted to provide you with digital resources in terms of how might you be able to access these once the presentation is done. If you're like me, you sit, you take notes, you listen, you participate, but you really don't start to process until the ride home or the next day or 2 days later or sometimes even a week later. You say, wow, I really want to go back to that. And so what we wanted to do was provide you with a variety of resources that we might have. We're going to be working off of a PLC brochure as sort of an anchor. Some of the things that we have done as a district within our system, some videos that we've used to help guide our work. We also have a book list of various books that you might want to read. And if you spend any time with Adele, within 3 minutes, and actually I'm surprised you haven't yet, she will recommend one book. Within 5 minutes, she'll have you reading 10 books, which is great because it really pushes you. And by 15 minutes, she'll want you to report back out on those. But always great reading. And these are books. My guess is you're familiar with a lot of these works. But oftentimes, I think for us too, in leadership positions, is to go back to those, right? What are we having our students do with the Common Core? It's to dig deeper into the words and really understand, and then go learn some more, and then come back to those words. And I think for us as professionals, as adults, modeling that as well. Go back to Dweck. Because I think we find the more we learn, the more we don't know. And so even if you've dug into these books, I would encourage you to go back now reading them through a different lens.
Okay, so with that spirit of reading and going back to readings, we have an excerpt reading for you to engage in this morning, and it's something that we have actually used 2 years in a row in our district. So just like Terry was saying, coming back to it again for a second look and a second reconsideration is something that we've done with staff. It's in your journal, and it's called Authentic Alignment. And what we'd like you to do while you read this is to text code with a protocol called the 4 A's. So if you want to write in the margin just the word agree for what in the text you agree with. What is there anything you want to argue with? What do you aspire to? What challenges an assumption you may have? And I would actually ask you to think about that one with the evolution of your thinking, perhaps over the last 5 years or even 10 years. Was this an assumption that I held maybe a couple of years ago? So it doesn't have to be something that you hold on to as an assumption right now, but tracking that thinking of this was something I definitely used to think and now I feel this way. And then we'll have a discussion based on what you code with those 4 A's around the implications that they may inform. So we'll give you a good chunk of time to do that reading. Before 2 is we could have your party of 2 join another party of 2 and make a party of 4, add another element, like if you hadn't really gotten to the implications for your work, really push that for the next section. But we're going to move on and talk a little bit about how this really connects to some of the things that we've done in Webster.
So we are going to take you to our mission, vision, and core. So part of the article was about having everything stemming from an organic core. And the mission, vision in Webster hasn't really changed. And I would dare say if you read our mission and vision, it's probably pretty close to yours, right? Because we all say about the same things. But what was transformational for our district was getting to our core beliefs. And it really was an inspiration from these resources that we were grounding ourselves in, that we said we're missing these powerful purpose statements of why we do this work. Why do you get out of bed every day and give this job your best, even when it's really hard and really frustrating? This is why we do it. So this is on our website, and I encourage you to look at it a little more strongly, but I'm going to highlight a couple of things. First of all, our first core belief is students first. And these statements were created by extensive two-way conversation. So they were drafted, then we brought them out to every faculty had input into these, parents had input, community members had input. It was just a great organic process to get everyone understanding and buying into these words and being able to see themselves, to have the opportunity to shape the words that we said were at our core. So students first, our tagline is each student is invaluable. That is the moral purpose of why we do our work. With all the noise that we've had about reform and change and APPR, we had to get to this as this is the compelling why. This is not about a test score. The compelling purpose cannot be a test score. It has to be something deeper than that. And each student is invaluable is a compelling purpose and a compelling why. We're going to talk more extensively today about continuous improvement and collaboration, and we're going to unpack those because those really get to the heart of PLCs. So collaboration is our core belief. These are embedded within our school. Since every teacher had input into this and had their voice in it, we engage in a process for them really connecting to them. Very well known. We are smarter and stronger together. And it is the heart of a PLC process. The highest performing PLCs is when every member of that team sees more value in the teamwork than in individual efforts. And if teachers don't see more value in the team than they do in closing their door and being autonomous, the PLC is not going to be as effective as it can be. So the challenge is, how do you lead teachers through a process to see more value in the team, to see that we really are smarter and stronger together? This is beyond just one person's work. So everything we do is collaborative. We model it, we drip it. We call it the drip method, where you just keep dripping it in these small drops, and eventually the drops will coalesce into a stream, right? And eventually the water is going to get flowing. And once the water flows, you can't stop it. You just have to channel it. But it's that drip, 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 drip. So that's why we present. Whenever we present with teacher, content director, superintendent. We are smarter and stronger together. There is no hierarchy when we do this work. Anyone with a great idea is validated, challenged, and can gain traction and support in a system that's truly collaborative. And this is our other core belief that really drives all of the PLC work in our district. How many people know Carol Dweck? Mindset. Oh my gosh, transformational, isn't it? When you really understand that growth is a process that takes time, it takes risks, you make mistakes, and you persevere. When you're in a fixed mindset and you really believe that you are what you are and mistakes are fatal, you're not going to admit that you've made any mistakes. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have to be really righteous, and you're always going to have to be right. And quite honestly, when we unpack who we are at our core, I would dare say many of you are type A students, right? Were you the ones that got A? You wanted to get 100% on those tests. You got one wrong, you think you failed. Come on, be honest with yourself. That's a fixed mindset, and we've got to break we've had to go through a lot of conversation as a team about it's okay to fail, right? So we use this term, one retreat, we spent a lot of time unpacking the phrase fail forward. Fail forward for the good of the organization. There's no mistakes, only lessons. And we will keep making the mistake until we learn the lesson. So let's fail forward. Let's learn from it and grow. And people in the team said how powerful that was for them to be given permission to take a risk. And even if it was messy and you didn't do it right the first time, it wasn't perfect out of the gate, you're going to try, fail, learn, and keep growing. So huge, huge organic belief that takes a lot of unpacking, a lot of modeling, and a lot of encouragement to get to the place where it drives a PLC. Now, here's something that we learned over the years that I want to unpack with you, because I believe, and you'll see in the article, that clarity precedes competence. If you are not clear, explicitly clear, about what the behavioral expectations are, what the system expectations are, what you want people to be doing, then it's very hard for them to be competent at their work. So when you're measuring the impact of a new initiative, you want to have this recursive cycle in mind. And you just want to keep doing this over and over again, where you gather evidence, and you say, what is the initiative we're trying to measure? And you gather evidence. It can be clinical evidence like data. It can be anecdotal evidence. We're going to give you some tools for that, measuring anecdotal, two-way conversational evidence, right? Then you interpret that evidence. So you not just gather it, but then you say, what is this telling us about the initiative that we're trying to implement? And then what action do we have to take to respond to our interpretation? And you see it's recursive because you can't do too much at once. You really you take one focus. And I know you work with Juanita, and she said, what's the one restraining force, right, that you can impact? One thing. What's the evidence of what we're trying to do? How are we going to interpret it? What action can we take? And then you go back through the cycle again. You can do this cycle maybe 4, 5, 6 times within a year, but you're only doing one thing at a time. Much more manageable. That was powerful for our team to really get the clarity of evidence, interpretation, action as we tried to do our work.
So we're going to be talking about PLCs and the role that professional learning communities have, and kind of having that eye on recommitting and harnessing the power of PLCs. So we want to take just a minute to kind of reground ourselves in what are those big ideas of a PLC. And this is something that we've had to come back to a number of different times over the course of really 6-7 years in thinking about the role that they play in our system. And the first big idea of a PLC, this actually is spelled out quite nicely in the brochure that we showed on our website, where you just kind of have some of those basics laid out, but is a focus on learning. And similar to what Adele said about the mission statements, many of them are pretty similar, and they really are grounded in that idea that the purpose of schools is for learning. And that seems like, oh, I don't have that one, I have that one. Can you do the up there? That the purpose is learning. But I think when we push that to a deeper level, we ask ourselves, can we examine all of our practices in light of their impact on learning? A collaborative culture, the second big idea, that we're committed to working together to achieve a collective purpose. And that's an interdependent process that we may have, sometimes you'll think of the example of if a marathon runner, group of marathon runners is all focused on the same goal and they're doing the work together, does that make them an interdependent team? No, because they could achieve their goal on their own. But the difference here is if we are truly working as an interdependent team, we depend on each other to achieve that collective purpose. And the last one, the focus on results. So Adele said that we'll be thinking about not just the test score piece, that's certainly a part of this, and we set our goals around targeted student learning objectives, but what other results are we going to be collecting to assess our effectiveness and our journey on this course? We'll be talking about a lot of different ways that we can be doing that. So, also, I'm stuck over here. Why don't we switch? We wanted to hit a little bit of the research too that supports why are these three big ideas something that's important to consider. And so we're just going to start with, how many are familiar at all with John Hattie's meta-analysis? Anyone? So really, what he was able to do is take a number of different studies on a number of different factors related to student achievement and attain an effect size for each of those different factors. A synthesis of what he found really resonates with those big ideas of the PLC, that working collaboratively rather than in isolation has a positive impact, agreeing on those essential learning outcomes, how will they demonstrate that learning, the role of assessment, and then using that assessment to inform your next steps. So a couple of examples from this that we've actually shared with some different groups and we've thought about really much more recently in our district. On the left-hand side, some of the things that we may have thought had an impact. And then on the other side, those factors that can be a pervasive influence on how our students are successful. And they're the ones that really kind of get at our heart because we would change those circumstances for all of our students if we could. So in interpreting these effect sizes too, I think it's important to just kind of mention that with these correlations, a 0.4 correlation is one that we would interpret as having an impact. But what's exciting in thinking about the role of PLCs, really, this is kind of like the drum roll slide, is what is that piece that really can have an impact? So if you've looked at some of this research, sometimes you'll see it lined up, all 39 factors that they looked at and what the effect sizes are. And common formative assessments and the role that they can play in gathering the evidence of our students' learning, first actually agreeing on what those outcomes are, but then gathering the evidence and then using them to inform the next steps, 0.9 correlation for effect size.
So one of the things that we do is we use the Laura Lipton protocol of predict. So we put these factors out without the impact, and we ask people to predict what the impact of these was. And then the next step in that data protocol is go visual. So when you have people predict, and just you don't have any numbers by these, and they have to predict these, and you also have common formative assessments up there, it's fascinating to see what teachers think and predict will be the impact. And then when you put up the real results, very strong reaction. And I think it really helps teachers see, wow, we can have an impact on this. And it really changes thinking, which is really wonderful. So let's just do a little bit of talking about this focus on learning. When came to Webster 8 years ago and did entry interviews. So I entered really just as a learner. I'd customized questions and I sat down with key stakeholders in the district and listened to them. Union presidents, principals, lead teachers, community members, board members, just listen to what they thought, what were their hopes and dreams for the district, what they think was going well, was there obstacles in getting in their way. And I heard the system, really, the trended feedback was that Webster was a good district, but there was a niggle of concern in everyone's mind that we could be great, but they just weren't sure what was getting in the way. And when I really thought about it, it was because the work was siloed. We're a 9,000 student district, and to some of you that's large, and to some of you that's small, but we had 7 elementary schools, 2 large middle schools, and we have 2 large high schools. And the work was really siloed as I thought about it. Each building principal was making individual decisions. There really was very little commonality. The board was sort of setting goals in its own milieu, right? And people really weren't aware of the board goals. I mean, cognitively, they knew there were goals, but it wasn't impacting their work. And the work was pretty siloed. So we said, what could we start with before we even introduced PLCs? The first day that we had everyone together, I just put those 4 questions up on the screen. All the teachers are in the room, the board members are in the room, the administrators are in the room, and I said, how many people think about these 4 questions every time they stand in front of a group of students? And a lot of nods, a lot of hand raise. Yep, these are just common sense questions. And that was the beginning of a shared vocabulary for our district. That's how the work began. Just by getting the 4 questions in front of people and dripping it and talking it and modeling it. And every conversation we had with curriculum teams saying, which question are we talking about now? And how do we know? And just using this and really embedding this, having every administrator embedded. And then we made big posters and they went up in every building. And that was our first piece of shared culture. Because, you know, if you can't get people to engage with the work, you can't impact the culture. People have to see themselves in your work, just as they were able to see themselves in our core belief. So then as the journey continued, we used Juanita Davies, who you met this morning, because we were trying to get a way to put PLCs in place, and we were getting a lot of resistance from the teachers. You can't make me sit in a group and talk to other teachers. I'm really comfortable doing my own thing, right? So Juanita came in and we did a force field analysis. She took the one restraining force that we wanted to reduce, and she created a needs assessment kind of protocol for us. And then she came in and did focus groups. So she talked to many groups of teachers. She talked to the lead teachers, the non-lead teachers, the administrators, and then she gave us a report on the feedback. And it was, you know, we just kind of came to it, but it was such a smart way to do it because she didn't work for anybody in the district. She wasn't reporting to anybody. She was totally objective, and she just had a nice way of being real and letting people talk to her. So she gave us a report, and we were transparent. We gave it to the teachers. We as administrators spent 3 days looking at it and working with it, right? So then we're going along and we got a system and it's going a little better, but it's still like really not widely accepted. So then the teachers union stepped forward and said, we're gonna co-sponsor Juanita to come back one more time, because we're now deep enough into the work that people were saying, I think it has potential, but it just still wasn't working well. So they actually shared the cost to bring her back, which I thought was so very important, that they put their money where their mouth was. And we jointly developed focus group protocols so she would again do this round of two-way conversations. And so then she gave us the feedback, and I remember, I have an emotional memory. It's like, I'm tired, it's 6 o'clock, it's in my office, it's starting to get dark, and I'm like, we gotta get home, this has been a long day. And the union president was listening to the feedback and saying, he just kind of blurted out, teachers don't know what to do. That's the problem. When they're sitting in their group, they just don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So that's how this cycle was born. I said, okay, how can we make it clear? Clarity precedes confidence. How can we make it clear? What can we do? And we created this that night in my office, the union president, myself, Juanita, and some administrators and lead teachers. And I'm telling you, this has been so powerful for us, because clarifying the learning outcomes is the guaranteed viable curriculum component of this, right? Marzano. And then you just identify and gather your evidence, you analyze it, and identify the most powerful teaching strategies, and we call this the right side of the wheel, we call this the left side of the wheel. Then you implement, and you assess. So we've actually had every PLC group do the dot activity, where you say, where am I spending my time? And you put a dot, right? And we had our administrators do this as well. And where do you think we were doing most work, on the right side or the left side? On the right side. Easy, right? Gather the evidence, look at the evidence, right? Look at your stuff, and even analyzing is really cool. When it got to identify, implement, and assess, not many people got that far. So we put a whole focus, and for years we've had this focus, get to the left side. It's like a colloquialism. Are you at the left side? So if you'll see in your impact journal, we do have a team a way this came from part of our team, from one of our teams, and they had created this agenda minutes. And you can see that it says PLC check for today's agenda, and they have to identify where they're working. Which segment of the cycle are they working on? So that kind of rhymes, it really rhymes well. But I want to be clear and say that we did not mandate this. We did not say, here's the form. Everybody use this form, okay? Because we just felt we didn't want it to be about forms. We wanted it to be about the work. So it got us into a different conversation we're going to be unpacking.
Well, and I just wanted to say, but the clarity was there because these were made into posters, and they were everywhere, all over the buildings, and the left side, right side vocabulary was in everyone's kind of lexicon, and so it became then, well, how do we do this in a way that's also going to be really helpful for us in tracking what we're working on, and then in sharing it with people in the building that aren't necessarily at the team meeting. And that was how that form was kind of born out of a team's work and a team's identification of, we need a way to be systematic about keeping track of what we're doing.
So the expectation was that every team did the work and shared their work and put it on a shared drive. Okay, that was the type. The form that you used was your loose. Your team could create the expression of that, but the tight expectation was that everybody did it. Okay, so because we didn't want to get caught in the argument about the form, and it actually was a very good way to balance it.
And the other piece of that, from an administrative perspective, particularly as a K-12 director between 11 buildings, is to be able to see where our team's at. What is the work? And it's not about, I catch you not doing it. It's about, how do I support the work that you are doing? How do I find commonality among PLCs? If we have multiple grade levels, or grade levels from multiple buildings engaging in the same sort of work, are there ways we can bring those two together? And opening up those lines of dialogue, which we naturally isolate ourselves, though we are by nature social people as teachers, right? And so what I want you to do, our next step in terms of the high impact journal is to look at a tool that we dug into. It's page 6 in your high impact journal. And it's really a self-reflection tool. And so last year, at the beginning of last year, or really towards the end of 2 years ago, we found ourselves, as we were sort of working through the muck of multiple systems changes, I guess is probably the best way to put it, some of them coming from a larger system than ours. We had to really, we lost our way a little bit. And so what we heard from teachers and what we heard from administrators was we needed to recommit to PLCs. We'd been doing them, but have we lost our way a little bit? Have we been distracted from the work? And so last year, starting with our administrative retreat, carrying into our lead teacher retreat, and then throughout our starting of the school year, it was, let's recommit to PLCs. And so what we provided for teams at the building level, department level, was a simple tool to say, here's our current reality. Here are things that we would, where would we like to be, and what are some simple steps that we can accomplish, be it in a month, be it in 6 months, be it in a year, that move us closer to our desired reality. And so just take a minute. If you're working with a team member, talk through it. What might be some components within this? Where might you see this fit within your work? And or is there a way that this might capture some of what you're doing currently?
We appreciate that this is an engaging topic. I do want to stretch this form a little bit. So the way this is laid out in your journal is just condensed because we had to fit it on a page. When we actually use it, we've manipulated it all kinds of different ways. We put it on long paper, short paper. We've taken one line of it and just worked through one line, one of the shifts with teams, so they're not overwhelmed by all of the shifts. So it is electronic on our website. Please just take it and mess with it and use it. So I just wanted to put that bit of a disclaimer out there. We don't expect that you'll use it in this format. Just use the stuff. So now we want to move on to big idea number 2. And I love this part because this is so much organically at the heart of the work. And if you know Judith Warren Little's research, you know that there really are 4 kinds of collaboration that exist within a school. So the definitions of these are in your journal. Can somebody tell me what page? Page 7. And I want you to think about, as you're reading the definitions, what do I see happening right now? What is my current reality of collaboration in my district? Do I see storytelling and scanning for ideas when my teams get together? Do I see aid and assistance? Do I see just they're sharing their work, they're telling their stories? Do I see joint work? So take a moment, read through the descriptions, and identify, what do I see right now? Star, underline, what is my reality in my district? Take a couple moments and do that on your own. Anyone like to share some of the conversation they've been having about current reality? Adam, do you want to share what you were saying? I know. All right, we're gonna give Adam the floor for a moment and let him share what he observed in his district. How's that?
Thank you. So we were just saying that in our district we see a lot of the first 3 bullets, and in the sharing ideas, I said that boils down to, a teacher oftentimes presenting a strategy or an approach to dealing with something, and ending in a meeting with a bunch of other teachers asking me, so do I have to do this now? As opposed to understanding that the point of the sharing was so that we can all build a practice together. So that's where I think we are.
Thanks. Anyone else want to share where their district is at present? Leslie.
I just want to share a slight variation on the theme. We had a good conversation at our table about perception versus reality, and that when you define it this way, that maybe it would make it a little more explicit to teachers, because I think certainly if we did this exercise with our administrators, we would be at the storytelling and the aided assistance, versus if we did this exercise with our teachers, they would probably say sharing, or more than likely joint work. And that that there's often that there would definitively be a mismatch there. But we also said that by providing very explicit definitions, and then I think we'd even need to take it a step further in giving explicit examples, would really help. Giving those definition of terms would really help the teacher say, oh, Sean made a great point. He said, oh, with it being defined this way, we're doing, maybe it's more of aid and assistance and storytelling. But I think if you just hear the title of it, I think you would definitively see difference in our district.
I would say that'd be a pretty common experience, would you? That until you give the actual definition of it, teachers say, oh yeah, we do joint work, we do that. I mean, how many of you heard, like, you have to bite your tongue because the teacher's saying, we do that, yeah, we do PLCs. What's your problem? What's your point? We do PLCs. And you just need to agree, okay, and stretch. That's my motto. Agree and stretch. Because if you say, no, you don't, it's kind of like, yes, we do, no, you don't. And where's that getting you? Okay, so it's just, yeah, of course you do. And I remember, it is that risk-taking. When we were unpacking the teaching rubric in our district, it was transformative because we had an evaluation system that was so antiquated, it actually was typed on a typewriter. I'm not lying to you. So, and because they just never could agree to a new one. So we're getting into this work, we're unpacking the teaching rubric, and the teachers were all like, yep, I do that, I do that, I do that. For a year we heard, that's all we heard. Yep, didn't you, Terry? I do that when you're in department meetings.
That when you're talking for teachers, sometimes that when you're talking, and I'm a teacher, that you're talking about it, you don't want to say anything to your administrator or to your other colleagues that might make you feel that less than, or you're not doing as well. And I said with the new APPR, there's this additional pressure whether or not. But the reality of, we were talking about whether or not all students can learn at high levels, and I was very honest. I said, just for me, because I can't speak for anybody else, do I honestly believe that? And then I said, no, because what you are considering high level isn't working for this student that's in front of my class. But teachers are reticent to say that because it's suddenly like, oh, you're not really a good teacher, or you're not doing that. But I want the best for my student, and what is best is not what you're telling me to give them. And how do I get that? I can get any of my students to get through this state testing, but if he leaves me and he graduates and he still can't really read because I've done all these things to help him access, but he doesn't have what he needs to be independent of me, then I failed. And I have a student who's particularly underneath my skin, that's sort of that kind of thing. And so for me, I think for lots of teachers, those things are hard, but it's hard to have that honest conversation sometimes because you don't want to seem like you're not caring or you've given up when that's not really, you just want some honest answers.
And I think we shouldn't all lay this at the feet of teachers either. I think from an administrator perspective, we also do that. Oh yeah, our building does PLC all the time, right? We've been doing it since even before it became PLC, right? And so we perpetuate that as well. And so I think it really goes back to that culture component, which we read about earlier. Do we have that culture that says it's okay for me to say something that maybe goes against the grain? And we'll work together to come to a better solution.
Very quickly, we did have a nice conversation. As a principal, I kind of felt that it was on a continuum, that it's not one or the other, that we kind of go back and forth and we kind of have a mixture of all of these things, either whether it's on the grade level or just within a certain meeting time. You know, we might start off, you know, griping, so to speak, and then as long as it doesn't dominate the meeting, because we always talk about allowing people to have that opportunity. So I don't think that it's one set. I think where is it more, you know, where do you see it the most?
All of what you're saying is very, very good, and it's real. And we want to keep it real. And I think that the creating the safe culture is that people can be real and they are supported. So I knew that we had made progress when I was sitting in a group in a faculty meeting and they were unpacking an element of the teaching rubric. And I was right there. We were sitting in around like this, and there was a senior teacher on this side of the table, and she knows I'm in the group. And she had the courage to say, I don't do this. I don't do this well in my classroom. Can someone around the table give me an idea? Then I knew we were like moving. I almost got goosebumps, you know, because she felt safe enough to say in front of me that I don't do this very well. And that's what it takes. It takes that kind of courage to move a culture and a system forward. And how do you create the environment that's safe enough to say that and do that without the gotchas? So that's great conversation, and I think you're absolutely right that none of us live in level 4, right? None of us live in joint work. We know that has the highest impact on student achievement. So we always want to strive for it, but we're human beings, and sometimes we need to vent a little bit, and sometimes we need to process a little bit, and then we need to recommit to joint work. So this is Hargraves and Reeves? Fullen and Hargraves and Capital. And I just wanted to show you this, and if you want to delve more into it, they have a new publication out, of course. Yes, another book recommendation, but there's three lenses you want to look through as a leader in a district. You want to look at the human capital, and that word human capital just has a funny tinge to it, I think, because it just reminds me of like a herd of cows or something like that. But it seems so depersonal, but what it really means is, what are the skills and competencies that the people in your district have? And it's important as a leader to know that, just like we want teachers to know the actual levels of reading of their children in elementary school and the actual knowledge base they have in science in the secondary. You need, as a leader, to know the actual competence of your staff as you lead them in your building, in your department, right? And then you have to think about, what do they know now and what do they need to know? And design meaningful learning experiences so to get them to a shared level of competence to do the work together, okay? That's human capital. Social capital is how they relate to each other. And we've used Roland Barthes and Borkenschneider's research a great deal. Every single year we've done the work. And Roland Barthes has a quote that we've brought back 2 or 3 times over this cycle of 8 years that says, the relationship among adults in the schoolhouse has more impact on student achievement than any other factor in the schoolhouse. The relationship among adults. If adults are at war, if adults are in silos, it's going to impact negatively on student achievement. But on the converse, if the adults are getting along and the adults are doing joint work, it has more impact on student achievement. It just supports that whole notion. So how do people relate socially? And how, as a leader, can you get to the place where people understand that the way they treat each other matters and the way they behave matters as adults? because then it all focuses on decisional capital. And decisional capital is, do people in the system have the courage to stay in the moment and make decisions based on the good of all students? Think about that. Are decisions in your district made with the good of all students in mind? Now, I've worked in other systems, and I've seen decisions made on a lot of other things besides students. I've seen decisions made on financial impact solely. I've seen decisions be made on for political reasons. I've seen decisions be made for ego reasons. Lots of reasons decisions get made. The key, the highest impact decision is the decision that gets made with the good of all students in mind. And if you're thinking about all the lenses, you can really keep that focus, keep that organic core of students first in not only how you develop people, how you expect them to relate, but how they make decisions and how you make decisions in the schoolhouse. So joint work requires interdependence, really requires relating differently. And we know that, and then we got some pushback from our team that said, but wait a minute, you had us read Daniel Pink, Motivation 2.0, right? And he says that autonomy is essential for success. So take those two big ideas, interdependence and autonomy, and juxtapose them for a minute. Put them on the table, let them jiggle around. How do they relate? Have a conversation at your table. 3 minutes and we're going to share out. How does joint work and interdependence relate to autonomy in the schoolhouse? Go. So if you could just finish your conversation, put your focus on Jim, he's got the floor.
In thinking about this in my head, I came to that the autonomy is not for the individual, but the autonomy is for the team that the teachers are working with. You got there too, right? All right. So that it's not, I want to be able to do what I want to do in my own classroom, but as, say, the 6th grade team in this school versus the 6th grade team in another school, you have some autonomy that to do and carry out the curriculum in a way that, and change instructional practices that you see fit, rather than, maybe district-wide somebody coming and telling you that this is what you have to do.
So we talked a little bit about the fact that autonomy maybe is not the right word for the work that we do and some of the work that we see. It's more like ownership, that we think about it within the context of ownership. That it doesn't mean that you're going off and just doing whatever you want. You're completely, not listening to your colleagues or anything like that, but that you're truly owning the work, and part of that is owning the piece that fits into the larger puzzle.
Someone else wanted to comment? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I was saying, just to reiterate what was shared down there, I had said in our group that the joint work is for me, the way I saw it, was the opportunity for all of the teachers to come together. The autonomy is, again, on each grade level. Because I was saying to Karen, what you're doing in the 5th grade may be different than what we're doing in the 6th grade. But there's a difference between autonomy and isolation. Autonomy does not, if a grade level rather is autonomous, it doesn't mean that they are isolated. Provided that all the teachers in that on that PLC team are bringing something to the table each time they meet. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when we go in the classroom and close the door, it's us and the children. It always has been, it always will be. But when we come back to the grade level meeting, it's what did you do in your classroom? What did I do in my classroom that worked? And that's really, to me, the essence of PLC, because maybe you did something in your class that the kids got it right away. I'm still trying to muddle my way through it. I don't seem to be able to get them to where I want them to go. What did you do that worked? Let's talk. Let's have a dialogue. I've done it. Where I actually went down and was sharing yesterday. 2 years ago, I had a 6th grade class where there was one. They were really struggling with the reading, and I was really struggling and frustrated trying to get them to where I wanted to get them to. And there was a colleague of mine in the second grade who was really proficient in phonemic awareness and so on. And I went down and I spoke to her and I said, could you just come up and just, you know, spend some time with them? And she did. I'm not saying miracles happen, but, you know, it was a starting point. It was a starting point. Thanks.
Yeah, that you're talking about the left side of the cycle now, where you're identifying the most powerful teaching practices. It's good. Yeah, I know. So think about what you said, and think about what Daniel Pink is saying, that autonomy is not the same thing as independence, and just as you said, or rugged go-it-alone individualism, but it's about autonomous working through interdependently with others. It's about that tight and the loose. So autonomy must be balanced by accountability. So you guys are right on with those two thoughts, and those are hard. And I got to tell you that in Webster, we have to come back to that, because it's a continual conversation with our teachers union about, you know, we need our academic freedom. We need to be autonomous, and we're like, yes, that's true, and it's not either or, it's and we need to work side by side. So it's just a continual focus on working together and getting the balance right. Okay, can we get this going? There we go.
So we'll push a little bit further. Your hands to be too tight. You don't want them to be too loose.
We got your attention though, didn't we?
Yeah. And then the clarity behind that too. So having that in mind about the interplay of the autonomy and the role the autonomy plays and the role the interdependence plays, but then also getting really practical with this idea as well. So in your journal, you have a page that has this graphic on it about tight and loose as it applies to PLCs. And then some wording at the beginning too that kind of grounds it. But if you look at the bottom there, it was dated 2009. And so as we're talking about this 6, 7, 8-year journey, this was a few years in, like Adele was speaking about earlier, where we realized through some of the two-way dialogue and the focus groups and some of the things we were hearing, we needed to have a little bit more clarity about what was the tight, non-negotiable kinds of expectations, and then what was the loose, and where was that room for building level decisions and collaborative team decisions, and really spelling that out on a document that people could reflect on. So with this, and then the quote that's right on the other side of it too, that's from Michael Fullen. We want to give you a minute to think about this notion of tight, loose leadership with your team, and read that quote and then kind of reflect on those implications for your system.
And so as we have been going through the three main ideas for PLC, our third big idea is a focus on results. And for us as educators, we all have wonderful intentions. Every one of us, right? Our intention is to do the very best we can for the students we have in front of us based on the knowledge and skills that we have. And we want to celebrate those intentions, right? That provides us with that moral purpose, that compass that drives the work, because otherwise it's hard to get up in the middle of the winter and you go to school and it's dark, and you leave and it's dark, and it's cold and it's snowing and your kids are struggling, right? It's January, and there has to be a bigger reason for it. So we have great intentions. What we've really tried to work on is say, yes, the intentions are wonderful, but the results have to match the intentions. And we need to move from that culture of intention, I wanted to do this, to here is what my kids can do because of the important instructional decisions that I made and that we as a team came up together with. And so right from the get-go, as we implemented the PLC process, we engaged in the SMART goal process. And many of you have seen this acronym before. What we tried to do was create a system-wide approach to creating these goals. And I remember having this conversation with teachers the first year. So I'm a new person to the district, and we're celebrating PLCs. And by the way, we're going to create student learning goals. Needless to say, I was not a very popular guy during that meeting. Because what the idea was, it wasn't about we're going to have lots of nice meetings. It was we're going to create actionable goals that will improve student learning, and then we're going to report out on those goals. And so that was a real challenge, and being strategic. And so for our social studies teachers, we're going to look at, it's not about looking at the Regents exam and saying, uh-oh, we didn't do well in the Gupta Empire question. So now we're going to spend 3 weeks on the Gupta Empire, right? We've all done that. We've all chased our tail. That one question, and now we're going to spend all the time, and then we crack open the book, right, on the test. Some of you have done that if you're high school, or even 3 through 8. You crack it, and you look, I covered that, I covered that. Oh, I didn't cover that. Ah, they got me on this one, right? And we do that. We play that game. So what is the strategic? Making it measurable as we know, right? And having an attainable, results-oriented focus specifically on student learning. And what was it's been fascinating, well, we have some documents, we'll talk you through them a little bit and give you some time to dig in. What's been fascinating about our SMART goal process is that first year, our goals at a district or at a building and department level were very superficial. They were. Part of it was teachers were afraid. They were afraid of the negative consequences that could come from if they didn't meet the goal. And let's face it, teachers have we have high expectations for ourselves, right? And it wasn't that we didn't want our kids to achieve, we just were afraid what would happen if they didn't. And what would happen to us. And so from the very first time we went through SMART goals, very superficial, we're gonna score better on a test. To over 8 years, and there are some examples, really being systematic and thoughtful in terms of what that looks like, to the point of we are going to focus on a specific development of a specific writing skill in social studies. Use that for an example. Or in LOAD, it was about speaking. We're going to use the ACT-FIL rubrics and we're going to focus on speaking. Or technology is about problem solving. Right? And we are going to dig into that. We're going to assess our students along the way. And we're going to set a goal that is challenging for us. 100% of our kids will progress one level in LOAD along the ACT-FIL guidelines for speaking. We put a stake in the ground. And think about the message that sends to our kids. To say, all of you, we are committed as a team that all of you will do this. And if we don't, okay, we don't. And after the first year, when some teams didn't meet their goals, there wasn't fire and brimstone. Everybody came back in September in their classrooms with a new set of kids. And the conversation was not, why didn't you? It was, what can we do to move this work forward? And year 2 was a little bit better, year 3, year 4, and you see where our SMART goals are at now. And we're really proud as a system of what that looks like. And so what we wanted to do was create an organizational chart that matched this and a process that matched it. And so our Board of Education in July has a 100 to 150-page document of data. Not simply, here's how our kids did on the 3 through 8 state test or on the Regents exams. We have quarterly data in our classes. We have NWEA. We have perceptual data. We've done strategic surveys with communities. We have PBIS data. And so the board uses that to set a strategic vision for the district. And then from that, our buildings work to develop their own goals. And what's been fascinating to watch is we went from 11 different goals to 1 elementary goal, 1 middle goal, and 1 high school goal. And that wasn't you've got to do it. It wasn't Adele saying we have to have this or the board. It was elementary principals saying, you know what? We are smarter and stronger together. And how do we marshal the resources that we have? And the same at the middle and the same at the high school level. And then at the department level, we said, how do we fit into this? So if our goal at the high school level is to increase AP enrollment, and that is one of our goals. And social studies, we said, how do we get kids in 9th grade, all of our kids, in 9th grade prepared to take on AP World in 10th grade? What are those writing skills? I don't care who it is. How do we open up the on-ramps? And how do we work to be part of that bigger goal? In LOPE, again, that's my background there. How do we encourage in 9th grade to have kids be ready for the sort of fluency they'll need in AP and as a senior? And we all play a role. We are all interconnected. And really this graphic, this goal-setting process, grew out of our organizational chart. And this is not your typical organizational chart, siloed in columns. It's what some folks lovingly refer to as the eye. Sometimes we're not watching too much. But what's critical at the center are kids. Right? Now, have you ever seen Heidi Hayes Jacobs? And Heidi Hayes Jacobs, I love this analogy, talks about Chris. And Heidi Hayes Jacobs always has an empty chair. And what she says is that empty chair should remind all adults of Chris. Because the student should always be there. And for us, our organizational chart is not about nice, neat columns. It's about Chris in the middle, or Susie or Sally. And what's great is our teachers, probably many of them have interacted with those kids. And they see them. Right? And even if you don't know that kid, you know of that kid. Or you know a kid like that kid. And so we look at this system. We have really driven, maximizing the effective student learning through effective collaboration, teacher leadership as the key cog in this. Because the teachers have that critical voice. And the other piece to this, it's not everything has to flow through the superintendent or the deputy or the curriculum director. It's a teacher says, you know what, I have a great idea. Or a group of teachers, I have a great idea. We have a great idea. And our response as a system is, why not? Why can't we, and what can we do to help you out to make it happen? And it's really been transformational. And it's fascinating to watch to the point of we have incredible collaboration on everything. Almost everything. Most things. And craving more collaboration and participation by our teachers. And so what you have is within your high impact journal, you have a couple of documents. I'd like you to just take a few minutes. I believe it's 10 and 11. And page 10 is really what is the flow of our goal setting process. And then page 11 is a SMART goal format. You'll notice this is not dissimilar from what you might find on the solution tree documents or in other districts. The one key piece that we brought into this, which grew again out of teachers, is the last column, if you notice, on professional development needed. And recognizing that as part of improvement as professionals, what are the things that teachers need? And teachers identify, we need to know more about this strategy because we want our kids to be able to do better in this component. And please help us. And so as a team, we collect these and then we develop our professional learning from that based on what teachers have identified. So take a few minutes, just look over these documents. Think about where might be either opportunities within your system or are there ways you might be able to co-opt these to fit the work that you're undertaking?
And then on the other side, the doing side, more like the hands, what you're doing and your behaviors and how those change as you go through a change. So we first learned about this, or I did at least, from a consultant from Learning Forward, Mike Murphy. And it really has been one of the most profound things I think that I have learned over the time that I've spent in Webster and played various roles in leadership, because it's something that I reflect on quite often, in different conversations and sometimes when I'm trying to really systematically collect data on change and think about it, and then sometimes even just really in the moment. So it does start to stick with you. It can be a little bit confusing thinking about all of these different stages and things the first couple of times, and I definitely experienced that learning about this. Well, what does that one mean, or what does this one mean? But I think really thinking about those two sides, the heart and the hands, is a good way to start kind of conceptualizing it. What I'd like you to do is turn to the section in your journal that gets to identifying the stages of concern first. So this is that emotional or affective side of the change. And read through those. Start from the bottom up, where stage 0, the awareness, is really not a lot of awareness. It's kind of the unaware stage. And then the first two above that, from informational to personal, are the kind of concerns that people express that really are about themselves. So that's why on the left-hand side of the column there, it identifies these concerns as being self-concerns. As we move up, there's a profound kind of change in the kind of concern changing to being about the task and what you are actually doing, trying to figure it out. This is taking me a long time to plan this class. You know, I'm working on this all the time. It's taking up all my time. I don't have, I'm thinking about this all the time. I'm gathering my resources. I'm really trying to figure this out. And then upwards into the last two stages, where the concern and the thinking really turns from attention to the task to the impact that it's having. And we've started to think about this, you know, as we've worked through many different changes in our district. So PLCs is one, Common Core is certainly another, and how people go through and express those kinds of concerns that they're having about the change. If you flip over to the next side, there's another column added which helps us to focus on what you might want to do, so that differentiated kind of support that you could provide for people going through those different sides of the change and concern. And then, if you flip the page, just to get a real overview, thinking about the hand side or the doing side, again, starting from the bottom, in those first three levels, Mike Murphy, who taught us about this, is a grandfatherly type from Texas, and so he calls these the fixin' to stages, where you're really just getting ready, and you're starting to maybe talk the talk a little bit and think about it, and you've got some of that shift going on, but you haven't done anything different in your day-to-day practice. So in those first couple of stages, you're really orienting and preparing. And then there's a turning point that occurs when you establish the time that you're going to try something different and you're really going to make a change in your behavior, and that can be a kind of a pivotal turning point. But as soon as you do that, you realize that you're in this mechanical kind of implementation where you're focused on the step-by-step, you're looking at, you know, maybe it's a teacher's guide, or you're really thinking about, okay, if this is my PLC, what are we supposed to be doing? Okay, we're going to do this for 5 minutes, then we're going to do this for 5 minutes, and thinking about it really in that kind of more mechanical way in your behaviors. And I think the two that I've often confused as I've thought about this is the mechanical and the routine, because it sort of sounds like the same thing with the title, mechanical routine. But there is a difference in that in the routine, you're focusing on increasing your comfort level. So it's like that practice. It's becoming more of a practice that you're getting better at, instead of just, how do I even begin and do this? And then that second turning point, you see the shift in people's behavior going from that attention to increasing their comfortability level to thinking about, how is this impacting students? And then maybe, how might I improve this again so that the change process will kind of begin again and renew? So with just that quick overview of these different stages, we're going to just share some different reflections on how we've seen this play out in our system as well. So with PLCs, some of these are the same as what was in your packet, but things like, at the management stage, people might have said, I can't believe how much time it's taking us to look at all of our data together. And then expressing the need that they had, the concern that they had, we need a better way to track this. You know, and then that gave us the thinking of, how do we support that team this is where they are. They need some help in tracking the data or organizing it so that they can focus on the impact. You want to share anything else from this one?
I have to say that at the beginning of PLCs, if we talk about that change, the self category, we actually did hear people say so strongly at the very beginning, we tried that. And it didn't work then, it's not going to work now. I don't want to change, basically. I mean, you hear the language, and as a leader, you want to really listen to the language that people are saying, not take it personally, but be pretty clinical. When you have this tool, you can say, oh, they're stuck in the self stage. So what can I do differently to kind of lead them out of that? Sometimes it's just too discouraging. Like before we had this tool, I would think that people were just being miserable just to be miserable, you know. And but this helped it become so much more clinical. Oh, they're stuck in self, and what actions can I take to move them up to task? And something that you have to coach yourself in is it takes time. I mean, people are going to start where they start. Some can start right with the task, but some personalities are just in self for a while. And to be clinical about it and to have these tools really made a difference in the way that we did our work, and we could move people through quicker.
And one of the things we've used that Mike worked with us on is, and you may have heard this technique, a one-legged interview. And so basically, it's you talk with somebody for about as long as it would take you to stand on one leg. You could stand on one leg for. So 30 seconds, a minute. It's quick. And we see teachers in the hallway. We see them in the line at the cafeteria. We see them in the parking lot. And it's simple questions, right? Yeah, the one leg. And it's very simple questions. What are you doing with this? Just to get at it. You don't have to write anything down. But then next time you go back to your desk, you're in your, wherever you might be, you're going to start capturing that data and then start coding it. We've also done that with tickets out the door. We'll capture data on tickets out the door, and then we'll code it based on where we think teachers are at. That gives us an understanding of what our next steps are, and helps us understand that people can be moved along the way. And the other piece that we often do as leaders is we say, we know who our go-to voices are when we really want to feel good about something. We know who to go to, right? I know what third grade classroom I want to go into when I want to feel good about something. And I know what fifth grade class I'm going to avoid like the plague, right? And then there's some fourth grade classes that I don't even know what's going on in there because they don't say anything. What this does is it allows us to capture all the voices and then look at it very clinically and then determine what our next course of action, because every voice counts. And so how do we make sure that we can target the interventions that are necessary?
So like Terry said with the one-legged interview, I think one of the important things if you're going to try this is to frame that question in a way that if you're looking for information about the stages of concern side and that heart emotional side and where are people with that affective change, you can ask them, so what are your concerns about? And then name the initiative so that you don't get what are their concerns about everything in the in their life.
That would take 2 hours.
Because that might be longer than you can stand on one leg. But what are your concerns about this? And then you will get right at what are their concerns. On the other side, how are you using? Or what was the phrase you said yesterday that Mike said?
You name the initiative. So if it's math, you say, how are you using, where we implemented math expressions, how are you using math expressions? Tell me how it specifically looks in your classroom.
What it looks like, yeah. What does it look like in your classroom?
And you get the teacher to name and articulate what it looks like in their classroom. Now, you're doing two things. You're gathering information there, but you're also setting the subliminal expectation that they are using it, and it's not just going to be okay for them to give you lip service about it, because you're saying, how specifically does that look in your classroom?
Yeah. So we've had a number of different groups be trained, and trained isn't really the right word because that's what we're calling it. We trained you all in one-legged interviews, but really just having the transparent conversation about how you can use this technique to gather that information with multiple different groups in our system so that they can employ it. So from principals to the directors to lead teachers, different other lead teacher groups that we've brought together for implementation of specific things. So if we're talking about the modules, we've had groups of teacher leaders who have been working with me and with our content area directors on that specific initiative. And then they've thought about, how do I go to my colleagues and just bring up these kinds of topics so that I can elicit their responses? And we've really made an effort to make that a systemic kind of collection of evidence, that if we are just paying attention to the voices that we're going to hear anyway, you know, and sometimes that's helpful. Okay, if I, like Adele said, I hear this voice and I'm reflecting that they're in that personal stage, and that's helpful to understand that person. But when I want to understand it on a larger level, I want to make an effort to hear that voice from everybody, even the fourth grade teacher where they don't talk.
Right.
I'm going to have someone go talk to them.
I think that's why when Juanita came in, it was so powerful. That's the first time we realized that we had to do something intentional to just get beyond the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to hear the squeaky wheel. They're going to talk to you. They're going to talk to their neighbors. They're going to talk to your school board. Okay? So their voice is going to get out there. What you have to do is be more systematic in how you collect all voices within your system, and then chart those voices so that you really get a true understanding of what's going on. So it can be, we've actually had our principals agree in our cabinets. We have, our elementary principals meet together, our secondary principals. They've said, we're going to do these interviews on this initiative. And they all went out and did them. Then they all brought their results back in and we coded them. And then we could tell as a leadership team then, here's where everybody sort of is. We could tell that if one building needed more support than another building, we could take a building's success and kind of cross-pollinate that. And it became a very strategic way to do it. It elevates your work to a more professional atmosphere and milieu through change, rather than just being sort of discouraged by the squeaky wheel voice. It really is a powerful, powerful tool.
And that's exactly what is kind of displayed here on the screen, was another time when we made an effort to ask some of these questions to all of the teams that were using the modules, the ELA modules. And we did have it broken out in different ways. So we had ways to look at the data by building or by grade level, and we definitely noticed some trends where certain grade levels were functioning at a more routine use already in the same amount of time. Sometimes we noticed connections among some of the teams that were pursuing other avenues for collaboration that we were offering to them too, that they were functioning at another level, and then noticing too that there were still some people functioning at a personal level, and what was that level of support and coaching that the other lead teachers on their team needed to embrace with those people.
And what was also important for us is to be able to publicly respond. And maybe not to all the voices. One of the things as we were doing this, so this was December, and if you haven't blocked out December yet, we have some emotional responses to December and some twitches, because we were deep in the work of the modules, and New York State was exploding around the modules, and so we heard a lot of these few voices saying it is crashing and burning. And what we wanted to do is find out what was really happening. Because for a couple teachers, it was, right? But for the vast majority of our teachers implementing, it was hard work, we recognize that. But they were seeing the results. And so we were able to code this information and provide it back. And what we did is we were strategic as a leadership team, and we interviewed every PLC, grades 3, 4, and 5, and we visited every PLC, grades 3, 4, and 5. We visited their classrooms. And so we gathered a variety of data. So it wasn't simply about anecdotes. It wasn't simply about the one person who you ran into at the grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. It was, here's the big picture system. And for leaders, we could support each other, right? Because as a building principal, you're part of a larger system. You hear a teacher saying, you know what? This isn't going. And we naturally want to respond to those people, and we want to be helpful, and sometimes that places a little nugget of doubt. And so this was as much for our own leadership team to say we're on the path. There's things we have to make adjustments to. We have to re-message. We have to think about how we're using time better for our collaboration. But we're on the right path.
And it also gave us the opportunity, I think, to highlight some of the real successes that were happening, because we didn't necessarily know where those were either. But this helped give us that lens where, okay, that third grade team that Terry knew about that was doing, such phenomenal work, let's make that a little bit more public, and let's bring that out in the open and celebrate that so that some of the others can see this is possible. All right, it brings us back to that cycle And the actions, interpretation, evidence, it's the same kind of thing. We were gathering some evidence around a certain initiative, and we were gathering evidence around how people went through change, and then it informed some actions. I think how are we doing here? Go for it. Okay. So you want to spend some time and then talk about this?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, so if you want to take a look at those tools, talk to your team. Is this something that you think you might be able to use in some way to help inform your actions and the way you differentiate support for people going through a change?
We could spend hours on minutia and still not get through everything. And we just have to accept that we're not going to get to it. But we have to be about learning. What we communicate is what we value. And so you have a number of examples of, or you have an example for our learning plan. We just went through this as an administrative team for 2 days. Yesterday, the lead teachers had the opportunity to look at the 14-15 learning plan around our 4 rocks and respond to that and think about how that might look like in their buildings. And then we'll bring this feedback together to build a truly finalized plan for the 14-15 school year.
So on page 16, 17 of your journal shows our learning plan. And if you look carefully, the lead teacher learning starts the month before it's implemented in faculty meetings. So we get ahead of it. So lead teachers discuss it, they discuss it with their principals, and then they plan to present it to the faculty the next month. And that's how we cycle through. And then if you turn to the next page, this is kind of like just a template for you. How we began to think is we captured on page 18 all of the time that we could think of that was available to us within what was existing, our reality. So we put them all in what we have, right? And we left it blank for you to do that with your district on page 19. And we're going to send you off and say, if you think this is valuable, work with your team to chart your time so that you can kind of then say, then what are our focus areas? And then how do we want to create a professional learning focus plan that the whole district can understand, K-12. And it is so powerful for our lead teachers to have voice into this plan and then for our principals to share it out. So every single teacher has a copy of the learning plan in September for the year. And we asked our teachers to give us feedback on it because the first time we did it, so this intentionally was last year, was our first, 13-14 was the first year of the plan. The feedback was fabulous. They're like, we've never felt this organized. We've never known that you've had a plan like this because we never really had that consistent of a plan, right? So it's good. And now this year, taking the step to get teacher voice in it over the summer, which we did yesterday, I think only strengthens this work. So we just wanted to give you those blank pages and templates and suggestions and tools to go back and work in your district. So we know that this has been a great time together, and if I could just have the clicker. I want to just finish because no matter what templates and tools and strategies you put down, culture triumphs above templates any day of the week. So we're going to end with a little bit of culture inspiration, because as a leader, it really is about culture. So let's look at our graphic again, okay? And remember that when it gets messy, when that line gets convoluted, it is about harnessing the power of your mind and staying steady as a leader and having the courage to just persevere through and understand and expect that your people will go with you if you work side by side with them. So this is pretty complicated, but I just want to show it to you. It's on the website, and it may be useful for you. When you manage complex change, which we are all trying to do because this work is so complex, vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action produce success. Okay, you really need to think strategically about, is my vision clear? Clarity precedes competence. Do my people have that human capital? Have their skills been developed to a place of shared understanding? Is there enough incentive to do the work? What's in it for them in order to really get this work done? Do they see the impact that it can have on their students? Do they really understand that? Do they have enough resources? And is the action plan clear? Okay? So this will just show you, and you can use this with your team to say, if there's something missing, then the initiative will end in a false start, in frustration, in resistance, in anxiety, in confusion. Have you ever led a complex change that resulted in any of those things? I have. And sometimes I wish I had these tools a decade ago because I think one of those components was missing and I wasn't strategic enough to know it. So think about that, mess with it, talk about it. It's a great tool. But here's something too, just to inspire yourself. I have used this with my team, and it's really helped them because, we are type A's, us educators, right? And we know that sometimes we think if we do the work well, it'll just be easy, right? But no, the misconceptions are that as a leader, you can make everybody happy. That as a leader, that people like change if you do it properly. That it's enough that if you take care of your people, there's not going to be any problems. Your building's going to be fine. There'll never be conflict. Because good leaders make tough calls unnecessary. There's not going to be the tough calls to make if you lead change well. And those are all myths. Okay? Because the truth is that change is messy. That line gets convoluted, and like I said, sometimes it strangles the life out of you. There will be conflict. People will resist change regardless. It's in our personalities. People, you must build their capacity. You must build their capacity. Don't assume they have it. Build it so that they can be effective, because you're going to always have to make tough calls. And just intentionally talking about this with the administrators calmed them down so much. It gave them permission to be a real leader and to stay tough during the times when it got messy, to stay true to the core, to stay sane and confident, and just say, we're going to work side by side, we're going to get through this, and we're going to do this for the kids. So just talking about it intentionally. This we used a year when we got a little creative and we started talking about leading with heart, brain, and courage. So we went to Oz and we learned lessons from the Tin Man and from the, I'm so tired now, Scarecrow, and from the Lion, because the Lion is my favorite. And then we talked a lot about courage. And we showed that clip. I am the lion. And then we just talked about this, about leading change from the heart, that convictions that are stronger than my fears. It doesn't mean we don't have fear when we lead. I don't like walking into a faculty meeting where teachers are shooting daggers at me. I don't like walking into a union meeting where they're all ready to kill me about something, and that you can feel the anger just like coming at you. I'm not particularly fond of those situations, but you know what? My convictions are stronger than my fears. I'm going to walk into that union meeting. I'm going to stay true to my core, and we're going to get through that issue together. My vision is clearer than my doubts. I have doubts. There can't be faith without doubts, but I just go back to the core and to the vision, and I keep true to that. My self-esteem is deeper than my need for self-protection. Powerful. Dissatisfaction is it's more forceful than the status quo. You will change when people become dissatisfied with where they are and they say, I know we can do better. Like in Webster, when they say, we're good, we could be great. I'm like, you're right, let's get there together. Poise that is more unshakable than panic. I get panicked. It bubbles up in my throat sometimes, but I calm myself down. I coach myself back. Look, you're okay. We got this. We're a team. We're going to get through it. Risk-taking that is stronger than safety-seeking, a desire to see potential reach more than to see people appeased. We just threw that out to the team and had them think and reflect and talk about it, and it just helps so much. All you'd have to do sometimes is put up a graphic like that and say, talk to me. Think about this. Where's your comfort zone? And where's the magic? Where could it happen? Is there a gap? And this is our last graphic we want to show you. I think I've used this every year in some form or fashion. We did book studies on Carol Dweck's work about growth. And then I asked my team this question constantly. I ask myself this question almost every day, and I'm going to ask you this question right now. Is there a gap between what you know are the best leadership actions to take and what you're actually doing right now? What's one thing you can do? One thing to close the gap. What's one action courageous action you can take, because it does take courage to be honest about this and to lean into it and to do something about it. Why do I care? And what am I willing to do about it? There is no more important work than the work we do in education. You are touching the future every day in the work that you do. You have chosen well. And when you do this work well, it impacts far beyond the four walls of the school. Your impact is so critically important to the success of your community, of our region, of our state, and I would say of our country. The work we do is at the heart of that. So thank you for your kind attention today. Thank you for engaging with us, and have a wonderful afternoon and safe trip home.